Descalers and chemical cleaners are very popular among home users, but they're industrial products better suited to commercial use. Not only are they expensive and largely unnecessary at home, they can potentially do some harm to your equipment. People justify their use by pointing out that it's got what coffee machines crave, by pointing out that professionals rely on them. And this is yet another of many instances where the answer to the question, should we do what the pros do, is a very firm no. Last time we talked about keeping the group clean without chemicals, chiefly because they are an unnecessary expense. Boiler maintenance and descaling are where we find potential harm. Descalers can remove relatively stable copper oxides from inside a brass or copper boiler or inside copper pipes, and while that's not going to cause corrosion or threaten anyone's health, it can produce off flavors until the bare metal oxidizes again. More importantly, descalers can attack the passive layer of chromium oxide inside your stainless steel boiler, which can lead to corrosion, especially where chloride concentrations are high, say above 60 parts per million. And repassivation is not something the average person can do. I'm going to talk chiefly about preventing scale buildup, but if you really need to descale a gunked-up boiler, I will have some suggestions for you. So get comfortable. Again, we've got a lot to cover, and while it might not be exciting, you definitely will find it useful, and economical too.
Oh my God.
It's like a miracle.
The coin on the left looks great, doesn't it? Clean and shiny. This is what we want our copper and brass to look like. I know Martha Stewart's copper is going to look just like that. The coin on the right might not be pretty, but a surface like this is actually better for your coffee machine. Copper has a low flavor threshold, so it's nice to have something between it and what we're drinking. That something could be cuprous oxide, and it forms a reddish-brown coating. Or it could be cupric oxide that creates a black coating. I'm sure you've seen both at various times. Both forms are considered stable, and both occur on exposed brass, too. There's also that blue or green or turquoise patina that indicates advanced oxidation, which we're never keen to see. So yes, oxidation, within reason, can be a good thing, but of course it's not a perfect world. As copper oxides grow thicker, they form layers which become less stable toward the outer surface. Eventually, a coating can reach a thickness where particles can be washed away, so you don't want a heavy buildup. A coating like you see here should remain thin and stable when exposed to water with a pH of, say, 6.7 to 7.6. This is what you want to see. This can affect your health. Brass contains lead to make it more machinable. Regulations have tightened over the decades, permitting smaller and smaller amounts, but there is no safe level of exposure to lead. Best practices in the food industry forbid anything with a pH below 6 to come in contact with brass. Coffee is around 5, so definitely acidic enough to leach lead out of exposed metal. Brass is safe in contact with water so long as the pH is above 6, which it usually is. But you really don't want it in contact with coffee. This portafilter is an example. You can see traces of exposed brass where the chrome plating has worn away. And this surface comes in direct contact with full-strength coffee, which means that some small amount of lead might well leach into my drink. So this is a great argument for stainless steel portafilters with closed bottoms. With bottomless ones, it hardly matters what they're made of. As for your stainless steel components, you don't want to use a chemical that could attack that layer because when it's gone, free iron on the surface will corrode, especially in the presence of chloride and heat. There are chelating agents that can remove free iron from a depassivated surface, one of which might be citric acid, which doubles as a reasonably effective descaler at higher temperatures. But I would point out that for every article claiming that it works for repassivation, you'll also find one claiming that it doesn't, or at least not well. The internet is always on standby, ready to confirm whatever bias you might wish to indulge. Prevention is always my priority. Your brew boiler or heat exchanger is pretty straightforward. Any water you draw from it is replaced with fresh water in a 1-to-1 ratio. But whether you have a dual boiler or a heat exchanger, your service boiler, the one that delivers hot water and steam, well, that one's a little different. Any steam that you dispense leaves minerals behind, which can cause a rapid buildup of limescale, even with relatively soft water. So always use more hot water than steam. Make it a habit. Find excuses to use it for rinsing, preheating, and cleaning up. Now let's talk about treatment options. Softening is relatively easy using weak acid cation exchange. At the risk of oversimplifying, I'll say that it swaps hydrogen for calcium and magnesium. So this softens without adding sodium or potassium like the more conventional softeners, but it does lower your water's pH slightly. Usually that's not a problem. Some are meant to go under or onto your kitchen counter. Some can be installed in-line for a plumbed-in coffee machine, and some can even be mounted inside your coffee machine's water reservoir. Weak acid cation exchange is fine so long as you have chloride levels below about 60 and sulfate below about 120. Parts per million or milligrams per liter, you choose. If you have an excess of chloride or sulfate, this type of filter can give you water with a pH that's too low for use in an espresso machine. Our good friend at homecoffeemachines.ie sent me this reservoir-mounted filter to evaluate. It's made by Brita and suited to ECM and Profitec coffee machines, and surely others as well. I've got very soft water, so I won't bother to install it. I've got no use for a water softener. I need like a water hardener. I do treat my water with a little magnesium and bicarbonate. I should probably do a video about that at some point. If your water is soft, like mine, carbon filtration is all you'll need, and maybe some added minerals, which you could get from bottled water. I calculated that if I add San Pellegrino to my tap water in a 1-to-6 ratio, I'll get tolerably good water for espresso. A bit higher in sulfate and calcium than I'd like, but not bad. But for now, let's assume that you have moderately hard water and need to soften it. This gadget also uses activated carbon and has 3 settings to permit varying amounts of water to bypass the ion exchange resin. You get a little test strip that indicates roughly which setting would suit you best. The filter holder is quite simple. The outflow adapter attaches just as it had before, and the cartridge gets a simple friction fit. If you have very hard water, or very weird water, or very high levels of chloride or sulfate, weak acid cation exchange is not your best option. Some people resort to using soft bottled water, but that can be inconvenient and expensive long term. You might consider reverse osmosis, which is also expensive but more convenient. So long as your tap water isn't seriously messed up, just add back some of your tap water in the right proportion. Do a web search and you can easily find mixture calculators online to help you determine how much tap water to add back. Using reverse osmosis is a genuine pain for plumbed-in machines. Finally, let's consider the options when you discover that you've already got a serious problem with limescale. For copper and brass boilers, I would say just bite the bullet and use the chemical approach, and then try to prevent a relapse with good hygiene practices and some water treatment. With stainless boilers, I would be concerned about depassivation, so I wouldn't necessarily descale the boiler. If the limescale on the inner walls is thin, solid, and stable, I would leave it, but the heating element is a different story. Limescale is an insulator, and it makes this noticeably less efficient. In this case, I'd pull the heating element and descale it with a commercial product or in a pot of hot citric acid solution. So now we've seen a number of tricks for maintaining our machines effectively with the least possible bother and expense in keeping with wired gourmet protocols. Next time, I've got another, to me, exciting new grinder to show you soon. So keep in touch. Cheers.